for making all of this possible, to have these incredible books, being a hub for literature and lovers of books and reading everywhere. Thank you so much for all that you do. We are so thrilled to continue to partner with you. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Welcome to Bloomsday and Beyond, a conversation with Emma Dabiri. My name is Amanda Johnston. I'm the founder and executive director of Torch Literary Arts, a local nonprofit that supports and amplifies Black women writers. We have been around for almost 20 years, y'all. Round of applause for that. 20 years amplifying Black women writers from across the diaspora, and we get to do that all right here from our home in Austin, Texas. So it's very special, and it means a lot to us to be in community with you and have you all show up this beautiful afternoon. And thank you also, good people, for the AC. We like being inside in air conditioning in Texas heat. But we are also very proud to do this in partnership with the Consul General of Ireland and Book People to present today's event that is Bloomsday and celebrating Bloomsday and Juneteenth. We've been working with the Consul now for almost 2 years since our first introduction, and it's been a wonderful relationship that we've been building, and look forward to continuing to supporting Black women writers from across the diaspora, Ireland, and elsewhere. But with that, please help me welcome Consul General Robert Hall.
Thank you, Amanda. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. I'm Robert Hall. I'm Ireland's Consul General to Texas, based here from our office in Austin. We're also delighted to be able to partner today with Torch Literary Arts and to partner with Book People on this event. This is the first time for us holding an event around the occasion of Juneteenth. We're really honored to be able to participate in celebrations of this really important anniversary. It's also our first time working with Book People, and it's great to be in the store doing an event. I know they carry many books by Irish writers. They put together a table with a selection of some of them, but do, after the event, take time to peruse the shelves here and look at what they have in stock. It's the second time now for us partnering with Torch on an event. We worked together last October on a wonderful event entitled Writers Across the Diaspora. And we really value our connection with Torch, the opportunities that this partnership has given us to connect audiences here with Irish writers, and to be able to support your wider mission of promoting the work of Black women writers. And then the event is also the third and final event in a series that we as a consulate have been running this month called Bloomsday and Beyond, celebrating Ireland, the island of writers. And this is an expansive cultural initiative run not only by the Consulate of Ireland here in Austin, but by many Irish consulates and embassies around the world. And it's aimed at amplifying Ireland's rich literary heritage. The initiative is rooted in the enduring legacy of James Joyce's book Ulysses. And for those of you that aren't familiar, Ulysses follows three main characters: Leopold Bloom, Molly Bloom, and Stephen Dedalus. And the novel explores their lives over one single day, the 16th of June, 1904, in Dublin. And for over 50 years, admirers of the book have organized events each 16th of July, Bloomsday, to celebrate this work of literature. However, our initiative this year extends far beyond Bloomsday, inviting global audiences to explore the depth and diversity of Irish writing across time. Through a selection of books by authors representing a broad spectrum of eras, regions, genders, and perspectives, the program showcases the vibrancy and the evolution of Irish literature. In Austin, under our program, we've heard from Cathy O'Neill, a writer of both non-fiction and also children's fiction books. We've seen an interpretation of an episode from Ulysses performed by Austin's Philippi Theatre. And today we're fortunate to have Emma Dabiri as our guest. By encouraging participants to engage with these different texts and to reflect on Irish literature more broadly, we hope to reveal the far-reaching influence of the Irish storytelling tradition and its continued resonance around the world. So thank you for being here to support our program and to celebrate both Juneteenth and Bloomsday with us. And let me now pass back to Amanda, who will introduce Emma.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, no, the book is incredible. I like that comparison to a Trojan horse, but I would say it's also like putting the medicine into the ice cream. If something is for you get so much more and it's all good for you. So I've been enjoying the read, and it really took some really interesting turns throughout history, across continents, but it starts very personal with you. And I empathize a lot, also being a Black biracial woman. Hair has been a very hot topic in my household, in my life. You talk
Yeah.
about being the center of a lot of attention as you were a child because of that otherness. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about where you start in your personal experience. You write about being ridiculed for having Afro-textured hair, and then making the decision to use relaxers and straighteners before doing the big chop, which is an experience a lot of Black women have. Making that decision is personal, but also very political, right? To keep your hair, to change your hair. What advice, talk about your experience with that, but then also what advice would you give to someone who's considering their own natural hair journey?
Yeah. So what was the first part of the question before the advice
Your
part?
decision. Sorry, I was very loaded. Yeah, about your childhood and your experiences, and then ultimately you making the decision to relax and straighten your hair and then chop it
Yeah.
and have an actual hair journey.
Yeah. So, okay, not only was like having Afro textured hair stigmatized in the culture I grew up in, but also nobody knew how to do my hair. So not only was having like Afro textured hair an issue, probably whatever way you styled it, like mine was also just not styled. Like I don't even know how. I actually don't like. I think I've probably like blocked it out, but I can't imagine what was actually being done to it because this is like Ireland in the 1980s. It's not even like you can go on YouTube and like watch it. First of all, there was no Black people around, so there was nobody to like, kind of pass on this information. You couldn't go online and like Google it or watch a YouTube tutorial or anything like that. You also couldn't buy any products. Again, you couldn't go online and buy stuff. We would occasionally go to like big cities in the UK where there would be like a limited amount of products available, but even the products that were available there back in the day were not like really giving. And then like my mom just didn't know even like what to do, so I just feel okay. Also in the context of like Ireland at that time, I know like throughout the Western world, like long flowing hair is associated with like girlhood and like femininity. But I think in Ireland, like particularly, there was such a strong culture and tradition of little girls having like very long hair, straight hair, and this is something that like is like really goes back into like our mythology and stuff. So to have hair that deviated so wildly from that standard, because it at the time my hair was short, it was just like it was not like cared for properly. It was just like matted. Like it wasn't. It wasn't okay. Um, I think to have, and also I have this picture in the book that I'm like, I think this is the universal hairstyle of Black girls with white mothers that can't do black hair. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can see, but it's like
I have the same picture. Yeah.
I think many of us have that picture. I'm like, what are you trying to do? Like, why are you anyway? So that's what was going on. So to be rocking that when everybody else had, it felt like waist length, like sleeky, like princess hair. It just felt like being out really outside of the kind of the boundaries of like girlhood, but also I feel like almost like out of kind of like out of humanity. Like I really, it was really, yeah, it just felt really intense. And I had like very, very like deep seated shame around my hair. You know, I would have done anything to have woken up and just had like straight, like mousy brown hair that like hung down. And then there were like my mom had a Nigerian friend. I remember she had moved to Ireland and she was just like, oh, let's like put like a texturizer in Emma's hair. This is when I was about 10. So my mom was just like, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll err to your expertise. And so this friend put it on, and then she was just like, oh, Emma's hair is like really coarse. Like, so let's just leave it on for like extra time, like double the time. So it was left on longer than it should have. Anyway, we washed it out and everything. And in the immediate aftermath, I had the hair of my dreams. I was just like, oh my God, it was like wavy and it was like it had been stretched out. And I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. Like my prayers have been answered. And then like it was literally like they had just I had been like burned and my hair was just like coming by the next day. It was coming out and I had all these like bald patches. And I feel like from that point on, it was just kind of like disaster after disaster. When I was like maybe 14 though, I met another Black girl. And this is like how I met another Black girl who had a Black mom. Okay, this is what's key. Because there were a handful of like mixed people. I think Ireland at that time had very few Black people, and the Black people that were there tended to be male African students. And then the Black children that were there were usually their children with white women. So to meet like a Black child, young person that had two Black parents was like highly unusual. But anyway, I was out at the disco and I saw this other Black girl and she had like long box braids. And first of all, I was just excited to see like another Black person. And then her hair as well. I was just like, oh my God, I need to like get on this. So I just made like a beeline across the dance floor, like introduced myself. I was like, who does your hair? Who are you? Who does your hair? Da-da-da. And she explained to me that her mom, she was Jamaican from the UK. Her mom had just married an Irish guy and the family had just like moved to Ireland. So she was just like, I can get my mom to do your hair. So her mom started braiding my hair. And then that was like a game changer. I just had box braids in my hair like all the time till I left Ireland. Then I left to go to university and finally had access to like Black hair salons. And I just started relaxing it. And then I relaxed it all through like, that was the end of my teens, just did it all through my 20s, like into my 30s until I eventually did the big chop. And I would say with the big chop, it was like for a long time, I really felt like my politics like didn't align with my presentation. And even like when I first moved to the UK, I was studying like African studies, and most people were like it was like very kind of much like a center of like Black consciousness. People were very having straightened hair in that context was not like aesthetically aligned, but I was so obsessed with having straight hair from how I'd grown up that I was just like, I literally don't care. Like I just need it straight. But I always knew that like that aesthetic really didn't align with like, yeah, my beliefs and my politics, but I guess I just didn't have the self-confidence or the self-belief to have natural hair. But when I got to my early 30s, and again, this was like, I think the early period of the natural hair movement, I remember seeing this website called like Black Girl with Long Hair. And I saw people that had like my hair texture that just had all of these like beautiful, like very cool, very chic, like and intricate and just really like cool, like natural hairstyles. And I was just like, oh, okay. Like I was just like, I think I can do this. And then I got pregnant like with my first son, and then that was also like a real incentive. I was just like, I actually just really, I'll put the chemicals on my own body, but like I felt much more reluctant to do it when I was like, you know, carrying a baby. So I just let my hair like grow out while I was pregnant. And then I think maybe at about 6 months pregnant, I did the big chop. And then I was just like, oh my God, what have I done? Because obviously pregnant, like I looked very different to how I looked normally. And now suddenly I had short Afro hair again, and it was like I had kind of like, it was like a long vanquished enemy had returned, and I was just like, why have I done this? I immediately went out and got like a blonde like sew-in weave. I was like, she's back. um and kind of rocked weaves for like, I don't know, maybe like the best part of a year, and then I was just like, no, come on, what am I doing? Took them out, stopped doing them. By this stage my hair had grown a bit more. I just started like experimenting with it, doing like natural styles. I didn't like it, but I was like tolerating it. And then as I got like more familiar with it, saw all the stuff it could do, I was just like, no, this is actually the motive. This is like what I need to be doing. And then a really interesting thing happened as well. Like, I honestly feel like the energy around me like really, really shifted. And this was like the beginning of like a profound journey that I feel like is just like constantly like evolving, of kind of like reconnecting like with myself, reconnecting with myself, but also with something larger than myself. I honestly think it's like it's quite like deeply like on a spiritual level. And I also feel like the people that I started to attract, actually that really shifted as well. I honestly just feel there was like a whole energy shift around me, and I was just like, okay, yeah, this is in alignment. This is far more in alignment with like the direction that my life should be going in.
Wow. Thank you. I know it's so loaded. We don't have enough time to unpack everything. But similarly, I too had a white mother who didn't know how to do my hair. Thank God I had Black women, my granny, my aunties in my life, who did take me after they saw the big knot, the big mat, and said, no, dear. But then also the flip side of that coin is they sat me down, detangled my hair, took over like 5 hours to go through this process to untangle my hair. But then the exclamation point on the end of that treatment and love was still, don't mess up this good hair.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah. And so it was from a very young age, like, you have this precious thing that you can't ever change. You can't do anything different to. So for me, I did do a big chop in my early 20s. And, just so that I could feel what it was like to be in control of my own hair. For that, in that alone, that I didn't want to be concerned with if I was living up to what someone else I loved thought about my hair, right? Family members,
Yeah.
don't cut it, don't do this, et cetera, et cetera. So I chopped it all off, and then I immediately wanted it back. And it took a long time, but it grew out. And so this is my natural hair. This is how it grows out of my head. But being a mother for me too was also very important. I have 2 daughters, and my husband and I, from when they were born, made the intentional decision to not process their hair, to not put chemicals in their hair. And that was, personal first, and care. I didn't want to introduce chemicals to their body, to their skin, right? But it created a complicated reality for us. One, to have daughters looking at my natural hair, and our hair is different textures. Theirs is thicker than mine. It's not the same. I think mine is like BC or something, and theirs has a tighter curl. But they would ask me from a younger age, when will my hair change? Mommy, when will my hair change to be like
to get
yours?
like yours? Yeah.
Because you're my mom, so my hair is going to change eventually, and it will look like yours. Or then going to school and having to suffer the comments, the teasing. They had afros, they had afro puffs, they had braids, and so there were comments. But I made the choice to tell my daughters, we all have the same hair. It's called natural hair. That's the hair that we have in our household. So I'm just leading that up to, you mentioned, having your son, and that's when you made the chop and didn't have the chemicals anymore. What has the relationship been with your children and their hair?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, this is so interesting, and like going off the back of what you said. So I didn't even know about like good hair. I just thought like the way that like my hair was just like the way that like Black people's hair was, right? And it was when I met my friend's mom who did my hair for me, and I was like, oh my God, I just live. I was saying to her, like, I was so relieved that she was braiding my hair. And I was saying to her, I just wish I lived somewhere, like where everyone was black. And like, I just like, sorry, there's a door banging. 1 second, let me fix that. Where everyone was black and I just felt like, accepted like for my hair. And she was just like, oh no, because you don't have good hair. And I was like, what? And I was like, that was my introduction to it. So on the back of the book, it says, and maybe it's not on the back of this one, maybe it's on a different edition, but it's like my hair has been disappointing people since birth. Because I think the expectation that because my mom is white, and this is my hair stretched out and like a twist out, and like that's even why it's like this is not how it looks like unmanipulated. The expectation, because my mom is white, that I'm going to have a certain hair texture, and then how far my hair is from that texture seems to like actually like upset people, or historically seem to upset people, not so much anymore. But my mom, well, I was talking to my mom about this. First few years of my life in Atlanta, because my dad, who's Nigerian, was studying in Morehouse, and I don't remember these comments because I was too young. But my mom said that people would offer, so my mom's like white Irish, but outside of her we were in like a predominantly, almost exclusively like black environment. And she said people would always be like, oh, like what a beautiful child, like
Uh-oh, we froze. You there? Uh-oh. You try to bring it back in.
like that initial, oh,
Sorry that we
so
froze for a moment.
that's all right. So that there was this like kind of from a young age, younger than I can remember, there was this kind of like shock that my hair texture would be what it was. But like I said, I was too young to remember that. I just remember my mum saying that to me. And then the next time I encountered it was with this like friend's mother. But then when I got the message like very loud and clear, it was when I started to come back to Atlanta. So this is like my first time like around black people since I'd been like kind of a young child. I still had lots of family in Atlanta. So I would go and visit my cousins in the summer. And I think the first summer I went back, I was maybe 16 or so. And I had my hair in the box braids. And I remember getting like a lot of attention from boys because of being light skinned. And this was like very new to me because I'm from Ireland, where in that context, it's just all white people. They're not viewing you like that. So this was like a discovery. But then I remember this guy going on a few dates with this guy, and he was just like, oh, he was very excited about me taking my braids out. And I just didn't know why. But again, because he had this expectation that there was going to be like this princess hair there, like tucked away. And then I took the braids out, and he actually like dumped me when he saw my hair texture. And that was like that was a very early lesson for me in the value as well, that like I guess that like a lot of black people, or like black men or black boys, placed on hair texture. And to be honest, it was devastating for me. It was absolutely devastating. Like I already knew that like white people, kind of hated my hair, and I was kind of good with that. I was just like, yeah, whatever. But discovering that black people also hated it and were disappointed by it was a different a different type of pain. It was quite shocking. And also at that time I was very because I experienced like a lot of racism growing up, not just because of my hair, just generally. I really loved being in Atlanta. I really loved being in like an environment that was like exclusively black. And then to kind of make this discovery that there were aspects of me that, because I had white ancestry, were held in high esteem, was like very difficult for me to make sense of. And I guess I'm writing about a lot of that stuff in the book. I also think if I'd grown up in that environment, I think I'd be a very different person to how I was growing up in Ireland. I was just read completely differently across the two contexts. But I feel that also gave me a lot of insight.
Mhm. Absolutely.
My
That's a
sons,
great segue.
sorry, I didn't
Oh,
answer
yes,
that
yes,
part. So I have two sons, and they have the type of hair that is more typically associated with being mixed race. So their hair, it still actually grows up rather than like down, but it's in defined coils. And their hair provokes like a lot of attention from people, and a lot of people touch it. Um, but it's a different kind of attention to the attention I got. People still think it's like pretty. I'm not saying that their personal space isn't people aren't intrusive about their hair, but there's more of an idea that their hair is pretty, which is not something that I experienced growing up.
mhm. No, and I mean, and that's period, they're your children. So like the idea that because you are attracted to my child's image in some way gives you space or, access to them, it's like that's wild too. I can with my daughters, especially, it was one of those things because of what I experienced. I was very vigilant in protecting my daughters and educating them, before they even understood the context or the language I was using. I was like, you'll catch up to it. But we go places and how people look at you and all of that, we wanted to be information and a shield between that. But we also have public figures that don't have that. And in the book, you mentioned Northwest and Blue Ivy, and them being objectified, and the comments that were made about Blue Ivy as a young child versus Northwest, and
Yeah,
specifically their hair. And that was coming from Black people. That was coming from Black community. I mean, a lot of people were talking about it, but we were talking about it in our communities a lot, which is sad and scary that these children's lives were on display like that. But
yeah,
now, there's we look at them now, and Blue Ivy's on tour, and looks like a mini replica of her mother, hair
yeah.
and all. So I just wanted to know, what are your thoughts on them now, and especially Blue's rising public presence as a performer with her mother, Beyonce.
Yeah, I guess there's quite a big difference in having like Beyonce as a mother than having like Kim Kardashian as a
Kim
mother.
Kardashian is
I'll just
yeah.
say that. Yeah, it's actually like crazy to think back to that discourse, and actually like how extremely kind of like violent it was and
Mhm.
intense it was, but how there's actually been like about turn. And definitely like if anyone's winning, not trying to pit young children or girls against each other, but if anyone is winning, it would arguably be Blue Ivy. But yeah, like people just, I remember because I printed out some of the comments, or I quote some of the comments that seeing that seemed kind of like characteristic of or summarize the general discourse. And it was generally people just losing their mind about Northwest's beauty, but this beauty being expressed really through comments about her hair texture, and then people being like very aggrieved by Blue Ivy's appearance, but so much of that also being centered around her hair texture. But yeah, it's there's been such a shift in how they're perceived since that point. Because this came out in 2019, but I was started researching it in 2016, so some of those comments are from like a long time ago. Yeah,
Yeah, from when they were really young, but they're still children. As I,
they're still children.
they're still children. And I was just looking up to that. I was like, how old is Blue Ivy? Because, how with her performance persona and hair and everything, she's made to look a little older than she is. She's 13, right? She
she's a
doesn't look
few
like
months she's a few months older than my son, and I said to him, I was just like, you guys are the get out and work. No,
yeah.
I'm joking. I was just like, you guys are like the same age. But he was like, he couldn't believe it. He was like, but she looks like a woman. And I was just like, you're the same age.
You're the same age. So yeah, I know that's a really hyper visible representation, right? And that's also performance. Like it's literally performance. That is
Yeah, yeah,
performance.
yeah.
Hair, makeup, and everything. But there's also, something to be said for the decisions we get to make about our appearance, and that is our own decision, and it shouldn't be positive, negative. It just should be, is, right? And I know there's a lot of history and social expectations that inform that, but like now we see Black women are not the only women wearing extensions, right?
Mm.
But
Mhm.
somehow we still are the ones that get ridiculed for it or called out for it. But it's common now across everyone.
Oh yeah, for
And then
sure.
also wearing wigs, right, is actually can be a protective style where you braid your hair so it's not going through all of the overwash and product and stuff. But because it's a wig, then there's comments, although we're not the only ones who wear wigs anymore, right? Either, right?
For
So I just
sure.
to put that out there too. What are your thoughts about folks self-expression that do embrace having what was formerly, well, I don't want to say formerly because it is still now, but has been ridiculed and even demonized for not having natural hair, but embracing, saying I can do what I want with my hair, and whether that's wearing weaves, extensions, or wigs.
Yeah. So one of the things I just find so extraordinary about black hair is literally like the breadth of expression that it has. The other day I had a silk press and it was like 90s Emma had returned. It was just like I actually had a bit of an identity crisis, and like when it kind of like frizzed out the next day, I was just like, yes, actually, thank God. But it was fun for those 24 hours. Um, and then tomorrow I'm gonna get like goddess braids. Last week I had cornrows. Um, Today I've got this. Like, so I actually think that it's all there for the taking, and it's all part of the rich, like, culture of creativity and expression and artistry that exists in black communities, and all of like the creative energy that's been poured into um hair culture in black communities. Like I actually it's like it's an art form, and the level of like expertise and like innovation in terms of the styles, the sculptural forms that can be created is super impressive. And I feel if it was another group of people, it would be seen as like an elevated art form, as opposed to something that is often dismissed until it's copied.
Mhm. Absolutely. Okay, I have one last question, and then we'll open it up for audience questions. Audience, when it's time for you to ask your question, you'll just come and sit right where I am, so Emma can see you and she can hear you. But my last question is, again, congratulations and happy anniversary, 5th anniversary of Twisted. It also marks 2 years since the Crown Act passed here in Texas, which made it illegal to discriminate against people for their hair textures and styles. It's a wild time and awkward to ask, but do you think in that respect it's getting better for us to be able to express ourselves and our image and presence in our hair? But yeah, it's well, while I'm saying that, my hesitance is because we know there's also laws being repealed and things being pulled back, and things feel very uncertain right now. But I'm wondering what your
Because I
thoughts
don't think it would be getting passed in 2025.
are.
Yeah, wow. Um, yes, I would say like in terms of, but like even the fact that there needed to be like legislation to make it like illegal.
Mhm.
Um, I just like the fact that just like letting your hair grow from your head as it does naturally like is a radical act that needs to be like protected by law. I just think is something that really highlights the kind of position that black people occupy in many of our societies. Like it's very revealing. I think in the UK, like we don't have the Crown Act, although I was involved in the campaigning for it. And basically we have an Equalities Act, and there's these protected characteristics within the Equalities Act. And you're not allowed, like, you're legally prevented from like or discriminating against somebody for these for anybody because of, according to these protected characteristics. And in those protected characteristics of race, there's like skin color, but there's nothing like on hair texture. So I was just like, oh, why don't they just, I was started a petition to just have hair texture added as well, because I feel like hair texture is the one that pertains, like, is only one that pertains kind of specifically to Black people. And I was like, because that's not there as one of the protected characteristics, there's kind of this loophole where there is all of this discrimination, particularly in schools in the UK. It was a really common thing. There were many school exclusions for people having Afro textured hair, and they were being told it was like too big and it was like distracting. But then they were also being excluded for like cornrows, which were like seen, like some of the justifications were, oh, this is like gang related, or we can't have like non-traditional styles. My response to the non-traditional styles was like, this is actually like, this is beyond crazy. There are cave paintings of people with cornrows. This is like a hairstyle that goes back to the dawn of man. Like, if you're going to talk about like non-traditional hair, it's one of the most traditional hairstyles, you know, that exists in the kind of history of human civilization. So yeah, and well, the Equalities Act wasn't amended, but a lot of schools like have changed their policy, and I'm like a lot less cases of it happening. At one point it was in the news like all the time, but it does anecdotally, it seems to be happening a lot less. And I know, like, with my children's schools, that I have two sons, as I said, they both go to different schools, and there's never been any issue around them wearing their hair. One of my sons used to like, my eldest son used to have like patterns and stuff like shaved into his head, which in some schools, you know, like is a big no, like a violation. But in his school, that was never, they never even commented. Like it was fine. So I think there has been like some improvement there, but with these changes in government and the direction that the world is going in, like, God only knows what the future holds.
Absolutely. And still in, I mean, it's only been 2 years since the Crown Act was passed, and there have been multiple cases where students have still been discriminated against, and their families have fought it, citing the Crown Act, and they were still found to be wrong. They held the child and the family accountable for the hair, and said that the school could have their code. So if you have a law,
Oh my
but
goodness.
have a law, right? Do you have
Yeah.
protection? But with that, I want to open it up for audience questions. So I'm going to move out of the way. Thank you so much.
You're
And if
so
anyone has
welcome.
please come right on up.
See. Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for taking the time to be here.
My pleasure.
And I had a question because there have been articles recently in the news about like the toxicity of the synthetic hair that's used for braiding. And I know of at least 2 companies that have been started by young Black women to make almost like I think one type of hair braid is made out of like bananas. There's another one that's made out of corn. So I just wanted to find out from you, like, what do you see in addition to developments like that? Like, what changes did you find in your research of like Black people getting involved in some of these products to either make them better or make them less toxic?
Yeah.
The biggest development I can think of recently, but be interesting to hear more if that was part of your research.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So this development about the carcinogenic and other like toxic ingredients in the synthetic hair wasn't like in the public discourse. So the research hadn't been done when I wrote this book. So I don't cover it there, but I have subsequently like been talking about it. And I used to use that hair like all the time, as I'm sure probably most of us did, completely unwittingly, actually being like, oh yeah, this is part of the natural, like healthy, protective, which is actually like really upsetting and chilling. But yeah, I guess like with the history of like extensions and like hair attachments, I guess when people were doing it before the commercialization of like the mass production, I guess like under kind of capitalism or neoliberal capitalism of hair products, it would have been before mass production, people are doing it like, you know, kind of in an African context. It would have just been organic materials, you know, so there would be a long history of it being organic materials. This development of it being these toxic materials would be something that is more recent, but there's still like a long recent history of it. But yeah, I think it's super exciting that there are these innovations coming, mostly from kind of Black female, I guess, founders and scientists who are creating like healthy alternatives. I actually switched out to using like human hair extensions like a couple of years ago, which also isn't without its like complications, you know, like where the hair is sourced, all of the stuff around that. My hair, you know, comes from where it's sourced from, like a lot of like care and attention goes into, but I think human hair generally, there's still that's not necessarily just something that is without its own issues as well. But I know in terms of like the health of my hair, since I've been using human hair extensions, when I take my hair out of the extensions, it's actually growing. It's longer than it's ever been before. And while that wasn't the intention, that has been like a nice byproduct. And it's been making me think that when I had synthetic hair, it probably wasn't growing because that hair was breaking it or doing God knows what damage to it. So yeah, I think it's interesting that we were using the terminology of protective styles for something that was potentially like quite damaging. Yeah, some of the language is so interesting. It makes me think as well of like relaxing our hair, which is this like innocuous, like gentle term for something that's like quite brutal and poisonous.
For sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
Hello.
you.
I was
Hey.
wondering, hi. I was wondering if you could talk anything about, if you knew about the history of Black hairstyles being outlawed in like New Orleans,
Mm.
because I only just like heard something about that. Maybe that the idea was that they were too too beautiful, like too distracting in that way. And I wondered if you could talk about that, if you knew anything about that.
Yeah, I write about that in the
Okay.
in Twisted, or in Don't Touch My Hair as it's called
Okay, I
here.
haven't read it
Yeah,
yet,
there's
obviously.
yeah, it's like the Tignon laws. And they were introduced by like a governor of Louisiana. I can't remember off the top of my head what year, but it was like the Black women's hair had to be covered in public. And the reason was that there had been like lots of, this is so funny, there had been lots of complaints from like powerful white women in Louisiana at the time that Black women's hair and the ornate styles that they were able to achieve with their hair texture was giving them like an unfair advantage in the getting attention from men, I assume white men. And they were like, this is not fair. So the governor was just like, okay, you must cover your hair. But then the response to that was these really like beautiful, I think a lot of these were free women of color, so they had some like means. Their response to that was often to use these really beautiful head wraps. So then that also just made them really attractive. So yeah, they were just so beautiful. Yeah.
And how much detail is there around like knowing exactly what these hairstyles like looked like? Do we have like any drawings or pictures or?
Yeah. That's such a great question. That's such an amazing question. So there's different sources. There are descriptions of like, there are some descriptions written by like Portuguese and other Europeans who went to Africa in like the 1500s and 1600s of the hairstyles that they saw. And this is before they were like taking people as slaves. So they're actually really positive often about what they see, because this necessity of kind of like stigmatizing and dehumanizing the people that they're encountering hasn't started like in earnest yet. So sometimes you have these really positive accounts that are quite detailed about these beautiful hairstyles. One of There's often like not necessarily images like photographs. Obviously there's not photographs, but I guess things like the Benin bronzes as well, which are made in like the 1500s or maybe even older. Oh, and there's another civilization, the Nok civilization, that's older. There's bronzes basically that have hair have hairstyles. So we actually have these like primary sources of what hairstyles would have looked like. In the United States, this was one of the things that I found like so fascinating, like really like chilling, but really interesting. In it, so the detail of how people's hair was not something that I guess the people who documented history were particularly interested in recording during slavery, apart from when slaves escaped and when enslaved people escaped. So in fugitive slave notices, escaped slave notices, there's often actually a lot of detail about Black people's hairstyles. It's one of the few sources where there is a great deal of specificity, sometimes around hair. There's a really fascinating paper on it, which I can't remember off the name of it off the top of my head, but I use that as a source in the book. So in the bibliography of the book, you would find that. But it actually shows that in the 18th century, so in the 1700s, when the hairstyles are being described, and this is actually quite interesting for men as well, they're often intricate and ornate hairstyles on fugitives, people that have escaped slavery. But by the next century, when you have the escaped slave notices, you still have detailed description of the hairstyles, but the hairstyles are not as intricate and ornate anymore. So something has shifted. And there's various kind of reasons we can speculate as to why that is. But yeah, there's some of the sources where we can find out what people's hair would have been like.
Okay, that's fascinating. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I have one question. First of all, thank you. I'm so glad that you said what you said, because I'm a pre-pub author here in Austin with Austin SCBWI. And so I'm writing this book, and I was very intentional about the little boy having an afro. And the reason why I put that piece in there is because I wanted to be both personal and political. When I grew up, my mom was your complexion. So she used to show us this movie, Imitation of Life.
Yeah.
And so in that movie, there was this constant tension between you're pretty and you're not pretty. And in order to affirm your prettiness, you have to be more white. And so my mom was very instrumental in helping us reclaim that identity by looking at ourselves through the scriptures and seeing ourselves in the image of God. So that way there would be no comparison, because there's nobody like me. There's only one me, there's only one you. And then later on, Dr. King starts to grapple with this. And his daughters in his letter from a Birmingham jail, they want to go to Funtown in Atlanta, but they couldn't go because of the color of their skin. And then he writes and he pens in the jail, this generation is dealing with a degenerating sense of nobodiness. And I still think that that's still apropos in today's world. So what do you think some things that, that children can do to help reclaim that sense of somebodyness? And then you have the movement with I'm Black and I'm proud and stuff like that in terms of affirmations.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great thing to think about. So I honestly I think it's important. I recently, like literally a couple of days ago, had a young Black British woman publish a long article about her natural hair journey, and in it she wrote that I am a TV presenter here as well, and she was saying, and when I would be on TV, I would often like wear an afro or wear like a very like traditional kind of like Yoruba hairstyle. And I would do that very intentionally so that that would be something that was present in like a mainstream space. And she wrote in the article that she saw me presenting something and I had like Fulani braids. And she said that was just like a real turning point. She was just like, it honestly just took, she was saying it took for her to like see just somebody that looked like her and that she admired, like rocking a style like that. And she was like, felt empowered to do so as well. And like for me, there wasn't as much representation, but as I was saying, like when I just saw that website, I remember it so clearly, like Black girl with long hair, and I saw people with my hair texture with their natural hair and it looking so beautiful. Like that really like activated something in me, or just gave me a sense that like I could also do that. But then I think on a more like spiritual level, what you were saying like about scripture is like really beautiful and key as well. I recently came back from a Buddhist monastery, a retreat in a Buddhist monastery, and one of the many profound things that I heard there was that one of the monks was saying that each person is the earth's invention, and the earth invented you because she wanted to experience the world specifically through your consciousness. So you've been created like very intentionally because you're meant to be, because the world is meant to be experienced through your specific consciousness. And I don't know, I was just like, oh my goodness, how can anyone be flawed or imagine they have anything wrong with them? We're all as we are in our the wide breadth of our diversity. We're all exactly as we are supposed to be. So I think a combination of those things, as you've kind of said yourself, is what we need, and is like really empowering.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Good luck with your writing.
Wonderful. I think that's a wonderful note to end on. You all are exactly as you are supposed to be. You are made intentionally, and we all get the benefit of knowing a little more about the world through your perspective and your eyes. Thank you so much, Emma Dabiri, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you again to Book People and to the Consulate General of Ireland for providing copies of Twisted for everyone here. So we have copies of the book on the table. Please make sure you grab a book and grab some lunch. It is lunchtime, so we have the light lunch available for you. But thank you so much for being with us. This has been a pleasure. We look forward to reading. I know you have several more books that have come out, so please all follow Emma Dabiri, read all of the books, and maybe one day we can have you here in Texas.
I would love to come to Texas. I've never been, so that would be awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Have a beautiful day, guys.